Okay, I'm going to get us started. Thank you guys so much for making time on a rainy Monday afternoon to join us. I would like to introduce you to Janezashvili. She is the director, I'm going to say is in present tense, even though the organization is currently on hiatus. Is the director and co-founder of Georgian Court Watch, which is a non-governmental organization dedicated to investigating judicial independence in Georgia and promoting judicial interest in Georgia. Nazi earned her PhD in law at Caucasus University, but has a long and storied career of international education by virtue of University of Warsaw and also American University, where she held a fellowship. She served as a member of the High Council of Justice in Georgia from 2017 to 2021. And as such, even prior to that, longstanding commitment to human rights issues via the law, member of many NGOs, human rights organizations, and legal rights groups, as well as the Georgian Public Defender's Office. So she is no stranger to the fight for independent justice in Georgia, and is well suited to tell us about current trends today. Her talk is titled "When Courts Become Players: The Unfinished Story of Georgia's Democracy."
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming on the event today. Today we'll talk about the developments in the justice system of Georgia, and I will make some brief review of around 12, 13 years, what happened in my country last decade. So sometimes democracy doesn't die in one day. It disappears slowly through court decisions that look legal but feel unfair. When I joined the High Council of Justice, in 2017, I believed that law was the best protection against the abuse of power. But soon I saw how power can use the law for its own interests. I realized that the judges forgot why they exist. Justice starts to lose its meaning. I'm truly honored to be here today and to talk about these issues with you. I joined Columbia University in 2009. It was a human rights advocates program, and I studied here what is the human rights, what is the rule of law, and values, which is important for the democracy and the country where the democracy exists. And when I was here in 2009, I had hope. When I went back to Georgia, and I had hopes that there will be some developments which will be positive for our country. I wanted to a fair, independent and court system in my country. Today, I come back not only as a lawyer, but as someone who has seen what happens when the hope is betrayed. I have worked inside Georgia's judicial system as a judicial council member. My obligation was to judge the judges, for instance, if they follow the disciplinary liabilities, ethical rules, if they follow generally the laws, which was important for the justice system. And my obligation was also to nominate the judicial candidates to the Supreme Court, to any level of the court system. Over the years, I have seen how courts cannot protect democracy, which happened in Georgia in very limited cases, and also how they can destroy it. The title today of my talk is "When Courts Became Players: The Unfinished Story of Georgia's Democracy." It is somehow, I think there's some positive meaning also, not very negative, because I still have some hopes that something will happen in my country, that the democracy process will be developed positively. But over the last decade in Georgia's court developed as active political players. The judges in my country, many years ago, they were like people who just executed the political orders, directions, but now they are players. But it is also about people, and I will speak about the people, brave people who still believe that the justice belongs to everyone. So tonight I want to take you through this journey from 2012 until now, and ask one simple question. What happens when the referees of democracy decide to join the political game? Over the last decade, in Georgia, the judiciary has transformed from a backstage institution into a powerful and active player in the country's political process. It has often drawn criticism for its perceived politicization and lack of impartiality. And they ignored, unfortunately, human rights standards, rule of law, and such kind of very important values. Rather than reforming and breaking up the deeply rooted judicial power networks built over time in my country, the new ruling party in 2012, Georgian Dream, has preserved and expanded them, turning the courts into reliable instruments for maintaining political control. The Judicial Council and judges don't simply follow the politics, they play an active role in shaping it. How did the judiciary become such a dominant force in Georgia's political landscape? At what point did legal institutions
Our computer is advancing, but the Zoom is not.
yeah.
Oh, policies.
It's not
And what point did the legal institutions overstep their role to be impartial and begin influencing the political outcomes? This talk explores how informal influence, formal reforms, and political motivations converge to create a judiciary that no longer simply delivers the justice, but actively helps decide who holds power and who is marginalized. Drawing on politically motivated cases and broader institutional trends, we will look at what happens when courts stop acting as the neutral referees and instead became players in the political arena. To understand how we reached this point, we must go back in 2012. So what happened in 2012 in Georgia? Georgian Dream swept into power on a wave of hope. So I remember the people in my country. I was a member of one of the civil society organizations at the time also, when they came out on demonstrations and they had the hope that there will be justice restored, but we never had justice. So what we should restore, I didn't know, but they had the hope that justice will be restored in my country. An era that would finally end selective justice and politically motivated persecution. So this was a very important point for the new reforms in my country. The leaders promised to restore justice, which never existed. Yet the temptation of the power arrived quickly. Instead of dismantling the old system that had allowed executive control over courts, the new government chose to use it. They inherited the similar instruments of influence and discovered how useful those instruments could be. The heart of the problem was the High Council of Justice, but body that appoints, promotes, and disciplines the judges. So there was a lot of discussions in my country about the Judicial Council. In Europe, for instance, this body is a very, maybe we can say is the most powerful Judicial Council. So there are many countries which has a Judicial Councils with administrative functions. Some of them has just only kind of the political, policy making, judicial policy making functions. But in my country, it composes everything. So it is the administrative body in the judicial system, which administers absolutely everything. Even, for instance, if any court wants to buy the pen, it is decided in the Judicial Council. If the Supreme Court justices should be elected, it is also decided in the Judicial Council. So it is very, complex functions. So therefore, the heart of the problem was High Council of Justice. On the paper, it looked like a protector of judicial independence. In reality, it became a center of influence. Inside the institution, a group of powerful judges decided who could rise and who would be silenced. I know this not from the books. I know everything from my experience, personal experience. I witnessed how informal alliances ignored the public interest. The career of judges depends not only performance or ethics or professionalism or integrity or anything like which is important for the judges. It depends only single phone calls, or text message from the right person. At first, we told ourselves, like the people who worked with me in civil society sector, activists, the people who promoted the judicial independence, we had the hope that it was a temporary problem. It was a problem which cannot be solved over 10 years or 20 years. And we had the hope that we can fix it. But year after year, the Judicial Council grew less transparent and less accountable system. International observers like Venice Commission have repeatedly pointed out serious problems in the legislation. And it didn't happen just once, or it was not just a one recommendation or one opinion. It was repeated many years. Every time there was the same recommendations. It was like a, I don't know, very long story about the judicial system of Georgia, how it was shaping. Behind the language of independence stood the same hierarchies and loyalties. By 2015, a phrase started appearing on civil society reports, judicial clan of judges. It was not a legal term, of course, and many people criticized us why use such a term about the judges. It described the feeling that justice belonged to a closed network, closed people of the group of some judges. This period, 2012 and 15, was supposed to be a moment of reform. Instead, it became the moment when the judiciary learned its own power. So they realized that they are very powerful people. They can change any decision of the government, any decision of the prosecutor, any businessman. And so they have a big power and they can play with this power with the politicians. And once court discovers that kind of power, it is, of course, difficult to give it back. So after that, I will talk now about the 2016 and 19 years. So it was a kind of era about the institutional capture and Supreme Court appointment, which was very, very important point in our democracy. By 2016, the structure was set. The judicial clan had learned to survive every reform. So we had many waves of the reforms, and there was a lot of amendments in the legislation, but along with the positive amendments, like, I don't know, about transparent sessions of the courts, there was also at the same time another regulations and rules which closed the transparency, which closed the, I don't know, democracy and hope for us that the judicial system will be developed. So every time on every reforms, they had possibility to survive. But this time they would not just survive, they would expand. So after 2016, they started to expand their power. Now, for instance, these people are in the constitutional court, in the parliament, so everywhere. So it's a very powerful system. The government introduced legislation to grant lifetime appointments. So me personally and many of my colleagues in my country believed that the lifetime appointment should be very democratic. For instance, if the people believe that they are appointed for lifetime, but it's not the same system as in the United States. We have a retirement age 65 years old. When judges reach this age, their term is expiring. So we had the hopes that the people will be independent because they are appointed for lifetime. Nobody can interfere their activities. Nobody can influence as the judges. But unfortunately, in our system, it worked absolutely differently. They called, in practice, it locked the same loyalties in place for decades. For instance, the system now is organized such way that most of the judges are appointed for lifetime, and it is closed. New generation cannot become the judges anymore, and we should just wait when they became, I don't know, 65 years old, but it is a very, very long time. They called it transparent, this new legislation about the appointment, for instance, but everyone knew the rules. The process was pre-arranged with Parliament. So any appointments, any nominations for the Supreme Court justices, it was every time pre-arranged. So I was sitting on the table where was decisions formally did, but of course we knew that it was pre-agreed. So in December 2019, Parliament confirmed a list of the judges whose names had been criticized by the international experts and local actors. The warnings were different, you know. It was like these appointments will undermine public trust and empower a closed network within the judiciary, but the votes went through anyway. From the moment our Supreme Court, which was supposed to be a symbol of the justice, became a symbol of the control, because it is composed exactly by the 28 judges. It is just one Supreme Court in my country. It controls. It should control only justice, not other people, other judges, or something like that. It is controlling everything in the country now. I remember that voting day, I was on protest in front of the parliament. There was a big protest. We requested to stop election of the Supreme Court justices, but first time in our history, the parliament voted for lifetime appointment of the judges in the Supreme Court. And this process continued until all the vacancies was filled. Every election was like a door closing. Yet by the 2019, the distance between the people and power had increased. Judicial independence was still the official slogan, but silence was the real slogan. So the so-called judicial clan controlled appointments, promotions, disciplinary actions that access to the training. For instance, they decided which judge goes to any kind of training. They should decide the training also. So this is just education, personal development, but everything was decided and is decided in the Judicial Council. And so by 2019, we entered the next stage of our history, where law was still spoken in the language of the reform, but reform had become a ritual, not a reality. So next stage was 2020, 2025. The decade that began in 2020 looked at first like a chance, because there was a parliamentary elections. There was a lot of problems, of course, falsification of the elections, a lot of problems with the democracy, but still there was some kind of hope because of the European integration process. But personally, I didn't believe it. After yet another disputed parliamentary election, every hope disappeared quickly. The same judges who had controlled the system for years continued to dominate. The government continued to speak about the judicial reform, but in practice, it only changed the packaging, not the substance, not the content, for instance. Power stayed in the same hands. By 2022, the problem was visible for everyone in Georgia and abroad. International observers and reports used the same words like pressure of judges, selective justice, political influence in the judiciary, etc. That same year, Georgia applied to the European Union membership. So this was very important year for our political and for our life generally, together with Ukraine and Moldova. For many Georgians, it was more than a political goal. It was just an emotional promise. The EU means fairness, dignity, and safety for us. It means belonging to a family where justice is not negotiable. But when Brussels reviewed the application, it sent back a message that you are not ready yet. Ukraine and Moldova received candidate status immediately, but Georgia didn't. The reason was clear that we didn't have a democracy, no judicial independence, and political polarization. For me, as someone who had spent years working inside the system, it was a moment of deep sadness. And after that, I started monitoring of the fulfillment of the obligations, which was a kind of 12 recommendations by EU, and I was personally involved in this process as a civil society member. Over the next year, the government tried to present small technical changes in the legislation, like, I don't know, how the decisions are published on the website. Judgments are published on the website. It is very technical. It is important for transparency, of course, but it is a technical. So there was some amendments in the legislation, and finally, in 2023, European Union finally decided to grant candidate status to Georgia. And it was message for trust. It was a message of trust and also, like, let's say, warning. We are opening the door for you for Georgians, but you must work it with honesty and to follow the rules which exist in the European Union. And so instead of celebrating responsibility, the government celebrated victory, and they used this victory for the political manipulation and for the political capital. It was not like a commitment. Within a month, we saw new laws, new control, new pressure on civil society in Georgia. And that is how we entered the new chapter, repression with a legal phase. In 2024-2025, new repressions with a legal phase started in Georgia. After receiving EU candidate status, many people believed this was our turning point. They hoped the government would finally open the system and meet European standards. But instead of reform, we saw control over the civil society actors, over the justice system, everyone, opposition leaders, everyone, absolutely. In 2024, Parliament passed the law on transparency of foreign influence, like in Russia. And there was a lot of demonstrations in the streets, and I personally participated, of course. And we had a slogan, "No to Russian law in Georgia," because it was a similar, absolutely similar. But I would like to mention here now that it happened, everything in Georgia happened very quickly. For instance, if it was necessary in Russia to make the pressure on civil society leaders, journalists, media, or other opposition parties, it was happening very slowly. But in Georgia, happened everything very quickly. So they passed a lot of laws and many, many new regulations against the civil society, against the opposition. Even today, I'm here now, but in Georgia, they are drafting new legislation against the opposition parties. For instance, Constitutional Tribunal can decide which opposition parties can be active in Georgia, can be registered, and which cannot. Angel in 2000, Angel that had spent years helping the victims of violence or defending the free elections or defending the democracy of the country and human rights, they suddenly called for agents. For instance, while I'm here, I received the letter from the anti-corruption department letter, and they're requesting from me to send all the information about the bank accounts, projects. Even they are requesting the information about the beneficiaries, information about the members of the training, participants, of the training, or any kind of report which was sent to the donor organization. So they are requesting everything, every kind of information. And it is, of course, not only about my organization, it is happening with almost every civil society organizations in Georgia, which are active and working on the democratic issues. And I would like to mention here also that when I left High Council of Justice, it was 2021, I founded CourtWatch. So this was Georgia's first citizen-led court monitoring organization. It was born from a simple belief: if judges will not be accountable to the system, they must be accountable to the public. So we monitoring, we were monitoring the court hearings in every court in Georgia. We had a movement. It was a social movement, and I was really proud about it because a lot of people joined us as volunteers. It was around more than 100 people, and in the villages, in rural area as well, when there was nobody monitoring the court hearings, our volunteers attended and checked if the judges are protecting the democracy, rule of law, fairness, everything which is important for the judicial independence. But unfortunately, currently, I am not able to continue working in Georgia. It was this, we trained young lawyers to attend the hearings, record delays, and analyze decisions, everything. And at first, it felt like a small experiment. Then we realized that it was a boom movement. Citizens reclaiming the right to observe their own justice. But because of the new legislation, what I mentioned, I cannot continue work with my friends and my colleagues. Recent years, many Georgian judges, prosecutors, members of the parliament, government, as other influential people are sanctioned. So first sanctions which came in Georgia, it was from the US 4 judges were sanctioned by the US government, and 3 of them are acting judges. They are still in the position. One is a former judge and involved in some kind of activities which is related to the corruption, and nothing happened. We requested the investigation from the prosecutor office in Georgia. We requested to conduct legal measures on such an important issue because judges are sanctioned. So there is a lot of issues with these people. We know they are rich people, for instance. There is behind something happening with the corruption, but no investigation conducted. Now there are hundreds, I don't know, maybe more than 200 people sanctioned. There are sanctioned prosecutors, investigators, police officers, for instance, judges, of course, and ruling party leaders. But unfortunately, it doesn't have any effect inside with them because it is important to have an investigation as a minimum, but we don't have any independent prosecutor as well. During the 2024 elections, I was there. I was in Georgia still. Observers reported intimidations of voters, pressure on public employees, and falsification of the results. So, as you know, after the election, it is important to have a fair justice system, to submit complaints and to have a discussion in the courts about the election results, which should be fair. I attended as an observer court hearings, and there was only one case when the complaint submitted by one of the civil society organization was satisfied by the judge and approved. All other cases, all other complaints was not resolved on behalf of the civil society organizations, arguments, and complaint. After that, in Georgia, started the demonstrations. So it is around more than 300 days now in Georgia. People are outside. They are protesting elections. They are protesting everything what is happening in my country about the democracy, rule of law, and about the justice. But to solve the political justice, recently a lot of people are detained. We have more than 100 political prisoners after October 4. So it is just a couple of days, yes, just a week maybe. And there are, only for just one day, more than 40 political prisoners are detained in my country. So there is a lot of problems with the judiciary, with the democracy, but you should have the possibility to go to the court, to have a free justice, to have independent judges, but unfortunately there is no such possibility. And what happened, for instance, for many years, the judicial hearings, like we are airing now our session today, our talk, there was an open session. So it was a normal for the democracy. It should be open. Any media, journalists could attend, but unfortunately, recently they closed even court hearings. And even, for instance, journalists cannot go inside the court area, not only in the room, area outside of the building to make information, to make some hearing for the public. So there's a lot of problems, and system was closing, and what happened, everything in my country in the political system, everything, I think it is because of lack of the judicial system is not independent. So, being here today, 15 years after I came first time here in Columbia University as a human rights advocates program participant, I feel both gratitude and grief. I think you realized when I was talking about it. So gratitude for the education and solidarity language of human rights and became my profession when I went back in my home country. But grief because the country I represent has moved backward. When I walked this morning outside, I remember 2009 seminars where I learned about human rights, democracy, rule of law, justice, and everything. The judicial independence is not only a constitutional principle, so this is very important to be realized by the officials who have the power. It is a moral discipline. We keep the discipline by questioning ourselves every day. Am I right? Am I fair? Or am I free? In Georgia today, too many in power no longer asks those questions. Georgia has a vibrant civil society and brave journalists. Some of them are detained now and imprisoned, who continue to speak out despite enormous pressure. We have citizens who march for the personal gain, but for the right to live in a country ruled by the law, not by the power. Our democracy remains unfinished, but I believe it is still possible. So therefore, I had such a title of my talk today is that I still have some hopes that something will be changed. What these years since 2012 until now was absolutely, we are facing the development of the power, development of the, let's say, dictatorship, let's say so, because I'm first time using this word publicly, but I am always thinking about it that we don't have any independent institutions, no public trust in the judiciary, in rule of law. Therefore, we have a lot of problems with democracy. Thank you so much for listening to me and for your attention.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to take questions from the audience. Go ahead and if you would introduce yourself first and then. ask
Sure,
your
I'm
question.
Stefan Shred, I'm the EU fellow, EU Marie Curie fellow here at Columbia. So we normally think of judicial capture as kind of a top-down process, really, with agency resting with the would-be autocrats, with the populists, strongman populists, whatever you call it. That's certainly the story in Hungary, and that's the story in Poland, perhaps here in the United States to some extent as well. At least in the first part of your presentation, I got the impression that there's considerably more agency with the judiciary, with the clan, that the politicization comes from the upper echelons of the judiciary itself in the Georgian case. And I wonder whether you can unpack this for us, sort of where does the original sort of agency of this, do we call it capture or simply politicization, where does that rest? I mean, does it come from the courts or does it come from without? That's not really clear to me, sort of how that's changed perhaps over time as well. I think that's quite unique to the Georgian case, at least as far as I can tell from your presentation. And the second question, if I may, in both Poland and Hungary, where politicization came from without, that is at least the story we kind of tell ourselves, but perhaps there's something in fact there as well. There have been remarkably strong pockets of resistance to the capture of the judiciary within the judiciary itself, and the story of these very heroic, courageous judges and so forth. What is the story in Georgia itself? I mean, the work you're doing is phenomenal, absolutely, no questions there, but I sort of wonder what is the sort of wider phenomenon, you know, how much resistance is there to that capture and politicization? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I thank so much for these questions. So I know what happened, for instance, in Poland, because I followed these developments. We had some movie shows in Georgia about the Poland example. I know judges there were fighting publicly. They were fighting for their rights. I know this happened in Poland, for instance. In Georgia, unfortunately, when we talk about the story about Georgia, we should talk about also what happened before 2012. This is very important also, because before 2012, we had also the problems with the justice system. Therefore, we elected new government to change the democracy, to change the system. But before 2012, we had almost the same people in the system who were ordered, or I don't know how to say, but who were influenced by the politicians. But they did not have a right as a players, as a powerful people. They were just people who executed the judgments. They did not have any other rights. So when we talk about what happened before 2012, when I talk to now today, they studied how to survive. They studied how to use their power. It happened after 2012. We have this almost the same people. We have many young judges also, but who were appointed after 2012, but we have almost the same people. So they had that past experience and they knew how the politician can influence them. And after 2012, they studied how to negotiate with the politicians, with the ruling party, how to start use their power and their voice. And it happened in Georgia. So it is important that it is said for me that unfortunately, there was a very limited examples when the judges started talking out loudly. for instance, by the judgments or through the public media or some different means. We have very few examples. Unfortunately, it didn't happen as in Poland, like when judges were then out of the courtrooms. They were, I remember, we have on our website also these movies are wonderful. What I saw about what happened in Poland, for instance, it was absolutely different. Unfortunately, we don't have such people who can speak loudly, openly, and fight for their rights. As regards to the capture, for instance, of the power, so sometimes in my country, when we speak about the judiciary, we speak about different institutions, like imitation of the checks and balance. We have a justice system, we have an executive body, we have a legislative body, but everything is the same, unfortunately. There is no checks and balance. So everything is governed by the one person who is a leader of the everything, like Olga, who is a Janezashvili and who became the rich person in Russia and came in Georgia, and he is now a leader of everything. Leader of the justice system, leader of the executive branch, legislative branch. So unfortunately, it is a difficult in such a system to find some people who has a power. So this system is captured by this person, I think so. Thank you so much. Here you go.
Yeah, I had a question that follows up on the previous question related to the previous period. So you started your analysis in 2012. And I was wondering, like, the additional historical layer that you mentioned in response to the previous question about the period from 2003 to 2012, Mikhail Saakashvili's government. And you mentioned that basically this judiciary was completely subordinated.
Yes.
So when Georgian Dream came to power, it was basically, it came as a force of democratization, right? And the justice reform was very much on the agenda. So the reforms that were pushed through then in 2012, 2013, what is your sense of why did they fail to transform the system and to bring new people to reform the judiciary at that moment when this was the push for the reforms?
You just go where you want to go and I can do the arrows. You want to go here?
No. Yeah, I had the photo, one photo. Yeah, this photo. So it's just an image. So because there was a good negotiation between prime minister and between the leader of the judicial council. So there's the person. There is many photos, but in reality there's just the photos. This person is sanctioned now by the U.S. First sanctioned by the U.S. government. He is a judge, and this person is a Janezashvili, who is a leader of everything. He was a prime minister at the time, and there is another former prime minister. So this meeting decided everything in our justice system and democracy in Georgia. We observed these meetings, of course, and listened what they talk about after this meeting when they first time met each other. But I think it was unfortunately disappeared, this importance of this meeting. But it was a starting point. It was a starting point in Georgia because they met and they negotiated, they talked with each other. For instance, they talked about increasing the salaries of the judges. They talked about every other legislative amendments. And after that, everything started. So it happened in 2012 and 13. And I remember the words of this prime minister, Janezashvili, who was prime minister at the time. He said that this judge is a good boy and good young boy, and they can work together. So it was just a personal connections, personal networks and negotiations. After that started everything, and behind the meetings, or I don't know, in front of these meetings, we civil society members or other people also talked about the reforms, amendments, legislation, I don't know, developments, but unfortunately it was only just a picture. But behind this happened such a meetings and negotiations, which decided absolutely everything. Even who was appointed on the judicial vacancy, it was decided in political party, not in the judicial council. Please.
I had a quick question detailing the sanctions that you've been talking about. from just what you've been saying, as well as my knowledge, it seems like the judicial sector has been hit quite heavily with sanctions, but as you said yourself, it's really not had any strong effect on judicial capture, as well as kind of the protection or like the siloing of the judicial sector as a political actor within Georgia. In your opinion, are there any ways that sanctions could be more effective? Any levers that the international community can use to
We
really?
can advance, just advance.
Yeah, I
the
have
computer and I'll
a
find
slide
it.
of sanctions and, yeah, just. Yeah,
Okay.
can you stop here?
Okay.
Yeah. So, just one moment, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. Yeah, this one. So, yeah, there are a lot of people sanctioned. You can see here. So 230 people are sanctioned. Yeah, from my perspective, it is my opinion that how this should be effective. That there should be investigation. They can be dismissed or, I don't know, fired and lose their power or any kind of such an effect. But we don't see such an effect, unfortunately. In some cases, about members of the executive branch, maybe there happened something, but about the judiciary, nothing. The people who were in all the positions, they are still there. They execute the judgment. They do everything what they did before. Unfortunately, it didn't have so much effect what I expected personally, because when it happened first time in 2023 about the judges, when the 4 people were sanctioned by the US, I hope there will be some process inside the judicial system. For instance, losing the power inside the justice, losing the image, I don't know, reputation, trust with the colleagues. You know, these leaders who were sanctioned are people who are like bosses in the judicial system, and they are trusted by the other judges. And I have such a hope that there will be some inside, not only investigation, some process inside, but unfortunately it didn't happen. They are still going together, working together, and ignoring these actions. Or it is maybe only problem about they mentioned in public speaking that it is just an issue of the traveling, not the issue of the image, reputation, or other, I don't know, but everyone is knows, unfortunately. Take a picture.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very interesting and sad. I'm really sorry that it happened in Georgia. And yeah, I also had a question about maybe you see any steps which like could be taken by the US, EU, I don't know, international organizations and other actors supporting democratization, like to return Georgia on these like democratic railways, let's say. And also another question, I'm not sure if it can be answered, but anyways, I will ask, like maybe you could give any recommendations taken like to the countries with fragile democracy. I'm from Ukraine, and I feel like the courts and judicial system is a very big part of our democratization. And because it's weak, I feel that all the progress we are doing, it can be just like it can be undermined at any point until the courts are independent, as you said. But at the same time, I can't really understand how to do that. So to make them independent. So maybe you could give like any I don't know, like recommendation or like point of view, or like which steps should be taken to make sure that they are independent and that they work.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's very big issues, both parts. So what about international actors? Of course, they can do a lot of things. We only have such a hope that the international society will help our country. Everyone, starting from the, for instance, European Court of Human Rights, governments, everyone can help Georgia, of course, because we use all the possibilities, legal or political. And it is very important for us to have a support. For instance, in the US, there is a discussion about the, as you know, Megabari Act, which is about Georgia. So we have a lot of hope that some developments will be positive about Georgia. And we still have such a hope. And for instance, when I talk about illegal measures, we apply to the European Court of Human Rights about this agent law. So there is a lot of possibilities, of course, and we still have the opportunities. as regards to the, as an example, what you can study from Georgia. Personally, I was involved in, I don't know, maybe 90%, maybe meetings or sessions, which was conducted about the judicial reforms in Georgia since 2012. Everywhere I was participating personally, and I know from my experience that I can say that there should be no compromise. Judicial independence cannot be compromised by any way, any technical, untechnical, or any kind of the issue. So when we talk about the amendments or reforms, it should be fundamental. For instance, when I talk about the Venice Commission recommendations, for instance, there was a, let's say, 10 recommendations, our government taking consideration of maybe 5 recommendations, others left. So everything should be completed, you know, even if there is only one recommendation or I don't know, single issue, which is important for the judicial independence, or maybe less important. Everything is important and we should not have any compromise. This is important and don't waste the time. So it is matter, of course, because when you waste time in the reforms, this power is increasing and they became more powerful people and they're, you know, building their networks, their influences inside the system and everything. Time matters, of course, and this compromises, because I remember when I was a member in civil society, we had always negotiations and let's give the, let's say so, right to the, I don't know, judicial council to, let's say, publish the judgments of the court decisions, judgments of the courts, and don't give the Supreme Court or something like that. We wasted a lot of time. Don't waste the time. This is important. I think so. Very briefly. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Other questions? So if I may, have a question, you know, I'm sorry, did you have a question? I apologize.
I mean, I was just curious about the effectiveness of sanctions, because the sanctions that were used against Russia during the invasion of Ukraine got a lot of, I don't know if backlash is the right word, but they were criticized because the sanctions affected the local economy and the people living in Russia more so than they affected the actual politicians. Do you think the same is true in Georgia? Like, how effective do you think these sanctions are at doing what they're intended to do?
Oh, yeah, thank you so much for this question. Yeah, it depends. Sanctions. So we had many sanctions from the European countries, from the US, so there, and it depends also who is sanctioned. So for instance, if the rich people are sanctioned who has a lot of, I don't know, finances abroad, and there is economical sanctions, it will have an effect. Of course, it depends on the content of the sanction. It is just a travel ban, or it is a sanction for the economical activities and financial freedom abroad. So I think so. It should be discussed separately, each example who is sanctioned and by whom and what kind of sanction is. We don't know every names who is sanctioned in Georgia. Some of the decisions are not public, unfortunately, but we know most of them.
So quick question on kind of the mechanisms of this co-optive relationship between Georgian Dream and you know, the various judges. And I know we know they're good boys, but we don't know the penalty for not cooperating. Do you get a sense that there's any, I mean, perhaps this is naive on my part, is that there's any dissension in the ranks of the judges? I mean, one presumes that whoever is first bought gets the better payment. Do you get the sense that the kind of co-optation is carrot or stick, right? Is it compromise or is it money that's being offered? And I'm just curious, like, as this goes forward, the repression is becoming more obvious, right? You know, in the previous years we were talking about a kind of subtle engagement. And so you talk about the speed with which authoritarianism happened. And it strikes me as if they're making agreements with judges in 2013, they have a long plan that then gets accelerated. Do you get the sense that the acceleration is for cause? Is it a sign of weakness or a sign of strength?
Yeah, thanks so much for this question. So, when we talk about the judges in Georgia, there should be explains the nature of the people who are appointed on these positions. There are very few number of the judges who are appointed because they have a good experience, integrity, professionalism, and they maybe deserve to be judges. And we also have the judges who are in the group of the influential network, so-called clan, and they are in this group. And we also have the judges who are appointed by the clan. And what we see a picture from outside, we see that some of the judges are very rich in Georgia, and we see that some of the people are just ordinary public servants. They are not rich people. And when we talk about the compromise, for instance, about the judges, there is some compromise, of course, some investigations about the judges. There is some public information which raises a lot of questions, but unfortunately, government doesn't have any reaction. In public, there is a reaction, of course. People are speaking about it, people are protesting it, but the government, I mean, ruling party, who is in the ruling party now, who after 2024, there may be resistance, let's say so. They are not considering this protest about the judges. So the issue when we talk about the judges, so what we can do with them, and what the compromise, for instance, we have about the judges, it doesn't matter, unfortunately, because a lot of information for us is closed. What we know from public information and what is accessible for us, it is of course enough to have many questions about them, but unfortunately, it's not effective so much for now.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Maybe just brief, sorry, did you want to say something?
no.
No, yes, no, that's great. Just answer.
I was wondering, what is the legacy of Saakashvili's reforms to the judiciary, and how much of it is comparable to, we tend to sort of herald his police reform as a success. I'm not sure if it's still a story today, seeing what the level of repressions have been in the country, but tell us a little bit more about Saakashvili's reforms and what the legacy of this has been, and whether that has planted perhaps some of the original seeds of the problem we're seeing today.
Yeah, so when we talk about this judicial, let's say, leaders who makes the influence inside the system, this is the legacy of this previous government. So the same people are governing the system, the same people are on the leadership positions. Unfortunately, this is legacy because they created such a strong system, such a strong networks. They have a still good cooperation with each other. Unfortunately, it happened so well, but when I started talking from 2012, it happened in Georgia that what we had before, this was maybe let's say route for the new government. They used to build new system and use this previous experience, this legacy, what we talk about when we talk about the Saakashvili's government and reforms.
But is that reform, what was Saakashvili's legacy in judiciary a fundamentally different one from the police?
Oh, it was
what are some of the key differences?
Yeah, it was a very different because we had during the before Saakashvili government, we had shown at the period and we had a lot of corruption in the system, in the justice. The corruption existed in every level. So just judges were taking the money from the parties of the court disputes. So after that, when we had after Rose Revolution, when we had a new government, every judges were dismissed from the positions. They were just fired, and they started the bar exam. What we have here, like in Georgia, they initiated the exams for the judges to enter in the system. They started the election of the new young people. They changed, for instance, age limit of the judges. For instance, 28 years old person could become the judge in Georgia. Then it increased again to just 2 years, by 2 years. And so it was a different, because it was more revolutionary, because they change totally the system, but unfortunately, what they did not create it also independence. Maybe they hired new people, new generation, gave the new generation new possibilities and hope to the people, but they made the system which was also influenced. So it is for the people, for ordinary citizens, it's the same, political justice we have still political judicial system, but unfortunately, it is, I think now it is a stronger from the perspective of the influences.
I have 1,000 follow-up questions, but we're probably out of time. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's relevant to the judicial system, but I'm just wondering, your opinion, do you think that you call it dictatorship, which I agree with, because I can compare it to the state in which Ukraine was in 2012 and 13 before the revolution. So I'm just wondering, from your point of view, could the revolution in Georgia be the only reasonable tool which could switch and change the situation? And if there any strong opposition which could lead this revolution?
Interesting question. Thank you so much. So there was elections in Georgia in 2024. It was a parliamentary elections. And there was still some hope in Georgia that by the elections, the government could be changed. But unfortunately, our government is not changed by the elections. But when we talk about the another measures, I don't know personally which is a good solution for my country. But what I need as a citizen of Georgia now, it is important to have a changes which will lead the democratic process and which lead, open civil society, human rights, democracy, rule of law, everything. But I don't know what is a good solution for my country, but what I see and what we faced the last couple of days, we had also the elections of the local government in Georgia. There is also the situation that the ruling party still is in the position that they are winning everywhere, let's say winning, but I don't know what is the solution. It's a very difficult, it's a really, really difficult situation in Georgia now. But what I know and what gives me the hope, this is a people who are outside in the streets and they're protesting, it is unbelievable that more than 300 days to be in the streets in front of the parliament, when you are fined by the government, when there is a new legislation drafted today, for instance, if they will cross the road in front of the legislative body, they could be detained for 15 days for this activity. So there is a lot of measures against the people who are demonstrating every day, and but they're still outside. And it gives me, of course, hope. But about solutions, I don't know anything about it. It's a really difficult question.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for presenting. Thank you for our audience.